Hello, my name is Tim M. West, and I am very proud and honored to have been awarded as the Southwest Ohio Advocate for Equality Ohio. When I moved back to my native Cincinnati in 2017, I did so having lived in a lot of major markets, New York City, the Bay Area, Atlanta, DC, Chicago, Houston. And I was called to move back to Cincinnati because I wanted to have an impact in a place that I had a deep connection to. I came back to a city to realize that there was lots of progress with regard to the LGBT community, a Cincinnati public school board that had extended rights and protections to trans and queer students, a community that seemed a lot more vibrant, the lack of discriminatory ordinance around employment protections, but there was still work to do. And so when I went to LGBT communities and saw that there was a lack of representation across different races in activity, and I also noticed that Cincinnati did not have a Black LGBT community, I really wanted to dig in. Equality Ohio has been a sponsor of Cincinnati Black Pride, which I am a co-founder of and board president since its inception. We continue to do brave, good work. And now people talk about Cincinnati as a place in our United States that has a Black, vibrant LGBT community, that we do film festivals, we have political forums, and that's precisely the kind of city that I wanted to be a part of. So it feels great to be awarded this, to be able to come back home. This is kind of a homecoming for me, and certainly an affirmation of the work that I've been doing for the past few years. What does advocacy mean to me? Advocacy is sort of drawing on what compels you to see the world be a better place and putting your energies and your focus into doing the work to see that change happen. For me, a lot of that inherent in the notion of advocacy is collaboration, working with other people. Yeah, you can be a singular advocate, but I don't know that you can do advocacy without partnership with other folk. And so for me, that's what's made the work a lot more fun. It's brought joy to the work, is aligning with that passion in me, finding other people who are passionate about those same things and want to see those same changes happen. It's been really great working with Equality Ohio because one, they've made efforts to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't just something that they espouse as an ideal, but in terms of looking at its staff, looking at its board, looking at the places where it engages, understanding that there are some gaps, right? I think sometimes the admission to say, hey, we could do better in this area. And so we really want to focus our attention and our energies on filling some of those diversity and inclusion gaps. I think that humility is the best part. From the very first time that Equality Ohio came to me, they were like, we haven't done a great job in this area. We haven't done the best job in terms of our outreach to the African American and Black community in particular, and we want to do better. How can you partner with us to help that happen? And I think when people approach with humility, it makes all the difference. And Equality Ohio has been an exemplar in that fight. What does lived equality mean to me? It's interesting because we talk about the idea of equality, but there are all of these moments when you're reminded that things aren't quite the same for you. So lived equality for me would be the ability to go in a sports bar and, with or without a partner and not have to worry about any statement I made or a pet name that I gave them, resulting in some nasty looks or even harm or danger to my physical body. It would mean that I don't just feel safe in the North Side community in Cincinnati where I live, but that I could go to any neighborhood in Cincinnati. I could be publicly affectionate or hold my partner's hand and not have to worry about danger. It would mean that my career opportunities professionally, that I don't feel that they're limited based on my orientation, but that I'm expected to show up and be excellent just like anyone else without any respect to who I decide to love. And so even as there's been a lot of progress, there's still a long way to go before we can get there. And in particular, as someone that's really doing a lot of work at the intersection of Black and LGBT communities, I want to feel that lived equality in those spaces as well. When I'm in the Black community, I want to feel that my voice is just as important as a Black queer man. When I am in the LGBT community, I want to feel that my voice is needed and valued as a Black man, so that I don't have to leave my race behind and just be queer, or I don't have to leave my queerness behind and just be Black. And I think that's the world that I'm looking to achieve in terms of lived equality. My dream for Ohio's LGBTQ plus community, I think more inclusion, more collaboration, more allyship. I think we have a lot of work to do internally so that we can be a more powerful, salient force. And so, people being able to notice it, like, wow, like that board's really all white guys, like, and it doesn't take a person of color or a person of another gender to point that out. It's just something that's mindful and that we know about. I've been thinking a lot about the election recently and the election results. And as someone, I didn't grow up the full time in Cincinnati. I grew up in a small town in rural Arkansas. And I think a lot about rural America and how proximity can create opportunities for relationships to be built, and that anywhere I've been where people have gotten to know me, they can't hate me. I'm a pretty cool dude, right? And so how can we be more intentional in terms of shifting the political landscape, not sort of having these blue cities and these sort of red suburban and rural areas? How can we be more intentional in our advocacy around developing relationships, partnerships, doing a spoken word event like in a small town, and inviting people to come be a part of that? I think that is the next wave of moving our country forward, and not sort of like bragging about being our blue cities and sort of talking in other ways about places that may seem to be more red. I think, people know what they know and what they've been exposed to, and how can we bridge those gaps? It's interesting in terms of like all the work that I do, the different work streams. I'm a professor by training, so I still do that, a class at a time, and moments. And I think scholarship and advocacy, academia was the first place where I met openly Black queer men. And so as someone searching for a professional life and career for myself, I was like, well, I know there's an example there. I had really amazing, brilliant Black queer professors, and so I wanted to be like them. So the continuation of that is sort of paying homage to some of them, many of them who've now passed on. And so I feel like I'm carrying that torch. I work primarily as a senior managing director of Teach for America's LGBTQ plus community initiative. And then there, I'm advancing safer and braver classrooms by helping teachers have the skill set and the knowledge to how do they integrate LGBTQ curriculum in a biology class? How do they create an environment where classroom management means respect for all people and respect for pronouns? It's a really heavy weight to carry the burden of that for an organization the size of TFA. And I'm not an alum of the organization, but I feel like I'm doing my part to equip us to create the kind of environments where students can feel safer in schools. And as someone who, as a teenager, survived a suicide attempt, it's my way of saying I'm helping nurture, and I'm being the teacher that I never had. How can I ensure that no students feels like they don't have anyone they can talk to and share things with? And so it's a long way we got to go, but it's really work that I'm proud of. And I do a lot of other things too. I do a lot of DEI consultancy for organizations like the National Center for Civil Human Rights, which is based out of Atlanta. I'm a college admissions expert that looks at a lens of equity and how can we ensure that it's not just the people with the means that can get into the top colleges, but how can we ensure that kids in public schools have those same resources? So a lot of work, because I have a lot of passions for equity and justice. For someone out there struggling, it's interesting because it gets better, and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm a little hesitant to say that. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and I think that we kind of offer a false promise in saying that. What I will say is that if you're brave enough to be vulnerable, I do believe that there are people in the world that will hear your story and that will connect to you. I shut a lot of people out of my life for fear of not being accepted. And I found out later that those people would have been completely accepting to me. And I think we're sometimes afraid to take the risk and have the brave conversations. have the difficult conversations, but I've seen that that's how you win hearts and minds, because I think there's a humanity at the core of every queer, gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans person, that anybody who's actually human and good is going to, even if they don't understand every aspect of it, that they're going to be curious about how they can support. And so I think what I would say is, you know, if you're struggling, having a hard time, find your tribe. But in order to find your tribe, you got to be a little vulnerable. You got to put yourself out there. You got to do a little searching, and that's why we need things like LGBT centers. That's why we need organizations like Equality Ohio as spaces where we can bring people together. That's why we need Cincinnati Black Pride. So when someone moves to the city from a place and they go like, I'm Black and queer, like, where do I find community? They can literally in a Google search, look it up and find a community in a way that we weren't able to once upon a time. The only thing I'd add is that I'm a creative, and I think I sometimes forget to mention that. It's not one of my formal professions, but creating as a hip hop artist, creating as a poet and a spoken word artist and an author, I think we need, when we talk about advocacy, to find more methods to bring creativity to it, right? Some people don't want to hear political diatribe, they don't want to hear a speech, they don't want to learn about policy, but there are ways that I have shifted mindsets through creative means, through a song, through a poem, through creative expression. And so that's my challenge to Equality Ohio, to keep celebrating those of us who are creatives, and that it's not just creative on the side, but how do we bring our creative voice to this work that we're doing?